Let's shift over here to another topic. This was one that a couple audience members have talked about and asked about, which I think is very simple to resolve. But what are your thoughts where those initial big volume long-term contracts come in? Do you see it coming from price reporters? Do you see it coming from an announcement? Or do you really see that these long-term deals just show up in financial reporting? Because some people are concerned about the disconnect about these contracts happening behind the scenes. But as you know, eventually these contracts have to come out and have to be disclosed at some point somehow. What's your thoughts there?
Well, it depends on the company and the reporting requirements. So, for example, let's say in our situation, because we're on the venture exchange, we have certain reporting requirements where if we did a long-term contract, we would probably have to describe it at least publicly, simply because it's so significant on a materiality basis. But you get into some of the larger companies, they don't have to disclose it because it may or may not, it's in the normal course of business. And so their need to disclose or becomes less of a regulatory requirement, and then it becomes a decision whether it's something that you need to be promotional about. What you'll find in the case of a lot of companies, and I've worked for several, is that you're going to have to find out the terms of what the term agreements are, is you're going to have to dig through the financials and kind of back calculate it. And the reason why is because if you've ever dealt with these transactions like I have, there's a whole lot of confidentiality in it. Timing, pricing, the counterparties, and where the deliveries are. Some of them are to be determined later, and others are strictly confidential. And so you get into that balancing act as to what you can and can't report. I think most smaller companies will say they have term contracts and give general terms about it. But when you get into larger companies, say the Camicos of the world, it's just a normal course of business, and there's no need for them to be reporting. And for them, they don't need to announce everything. So it just depends on kind of what the company's needs are and what the regulatory requirements are. I think, for example, if down the road, say we had a large book and we're delivering into several different contracts, and this is strictly hypothetical, maybe we wouldn't be disclosing all the terms. But if we're just delivering under one, that's the only one we have, then it becomes more difficult, one, to effectively, use the financials as a means to kind of report without reporting. You need to suddenly become a little bit more transparent on what those things are. I know from the shareholder or from the average member of the public trying to understand what these things look like, it becomes a bit of a detective work. It's just the nature of the way things are. Even if one were to do a spot deal, you could probably announce what the price is and general timing on when the delivery is, but you couldn't disclose to the counterpart. Likely couldn't disclose who the counterparty is, or even the location where it's going to be delivered. It just becomes you get wrapped up around the axle on some of these disclosure issues. But any company who's following what they're supposed to do, you should be able to, from their financials, be able to ferret that out. Until obviously there's so many transactions happening, it becomes invisible. Just from the trees become noisier than the forest.
To wrap that up, I think it really comes down to eventually the price reporters that will flow through eventually. Mm-hmm. And to not sweat it, because like you said, and like I know and everybody else should know, this will show up in the financial reports. So you don't need to worry about, will it stay secret forever? Absolutely not. And then when that time comes, when there's so many contracts taking place, the big volume contracts is what I'm concerned with. Big volume contracts start taking place. At that point, a lot's gone well in this market, so you don't need to be worried too much about it, because eventually it will come through with price reporters. And again, the financials is the only thing that matters. As long as you follow the financials, which will trail, but they'll come in and you'll be able to see how that's happening. And so announcement or not, irrespective, the big key is just pay attention to the financials and you'll be okay. You just sweat it.